Good morning. Good Erev Shabbos, everybody. We talked in the past about the construction of the Beis Hamikdash in different contexts. We read about it in the Parsha this week. There's several Parshios about the construction of the Mishkan, which eventually was replaced by the Beis Hamikdash. And it's an amazing, structure in the sense that it was built from scratch. It was built by man. And we don't know, or we have pictures or we have ideas what the Mishkan looked like. The Beis Hamikdash, we have all kinds of diagrams. And it's a tremendous engineering feat. If you look at the Kotel, they have these massive, massive stones. And that was only an outside wall. And some of these stones weigh 100 tons. Yet they were quarried and they were made to fit in place. If you look at the stones of the Kotel, there's no cement in between holding them in place. It's just the weight of these stones fit together. How did they quarry these huge stones? How did they put them in place? It's an amazing thing. One of the things that we're told about the Beis Hamikdash, that starting with the first one that Shlomo HaMelech built, is that in the construction of the Beis Hamikdash, you weren't allowed to use metal implements. Swords are considered, and knives and cutting implements are considered weapons of war. And the Beis Hamikdash is a place of shalom, of peace, and therefore you cannot build any with any iron implements. So how did they build the Beis Hamikdash? How did they cut these stones? How did they cut all the wood? So we're told, Drashim and the Gemara, that there was something called a shamir. The shamir was created according to Pirkei Avos. It was the last of the 10 amazing things that were created on Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos began. And it was it was the seventh of 10. I'm sorry. It was the seventh of 10 amazing things that was created, including the creation of script writing, the stylus to engrave things, and 2 tablets of stone. The size of this shamir was the size of a grain of barley. It was tiny, whatever the shamir may have been. And it was, nothing could withstand it. It apparently had the ability to split stones, either by exuding some type of a liquid, or simply by this creature staring at the stones. The stones split exactly the way they were supposed to be used. And we're also told that this shamir, this worm or whatever it may have been, was used by Moshe Rabbeinu to engrave the names of the 12 Shvatim on the Urim V'Tumim, on the stones. Again, we're not sure exactly how it worked, both for Shlomo and for Moshe Rabbeinu, but the shamir was created for this purpose. And we're told that after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the first temple, it ceased to exist. How they built things without it, I'm not quite sure. But exactly what is this shamir? What is this amazing creature called a shamir? And what does the name indicate? And again, it was a tiny, tiny worm, that either by placing it on the stone, it somehow cut through the stone, or it exuded something that may have like an acid of some sort, or a laser. I'm not sure exactly what it was. It's a precursor to the laser, because according to some sources, when the shamir looked at it, it simply cut. The word shamir, again, understanding the language, in Aramaic, shamira means like a flintstone, like a hard stone. But clearly it's some type of a supernatural organism. The word shamir in biblical Hebrew refers to a very sharp stylus, or made out of a hard substance, or sharp thorns, perhaps. Where did Shlomo get this shamir from? Where was it kept? Midrashim abound, whether it was kept in Gan Eden, and he had to summon it. Shlomo asked the Rabbanim, asked the Chachamim, how can I build the Beis HaMikdash without using any iron implements? And then they told him about this shamir that Moshe used. And he said, the rabbi said to Shlomo, look, you're in charge of all the spirit world, the demons. Get one of your emissaries to go to Gan Eden, or wherever the shamir might be, and bring it back. And there's one of the famous demons in Jewish demonology, if you will, is Ashmodai. He was the prince of the demons. And he was told to find the shamir. And there's a lot of midrash in the stories of how they went and found it, who assisted him and so forth. But basically, the shamir was under the supervision of a certain type of a fowl, a grouse or a chicken. We're not sure exactly what it was. And the shamir was taken away from this chicken guardian. And Ashmedai went to its nest. Anyhow, they brought it back to Shlomo HaMelech. And that's how he was able to build the Beis HaMikdash. Was it a plant? Was it an animal? And what was the nature of this amazing creature? According to certain legends, it may have been some type of an herb or acid of some sort. The Rambam and Rashi consider it to have been some type of a living creature. And according to the Gemara, if this creature would look at a substance, it would split. Not unlike our lasers today. According to early sources, the shamir was a green stone, a very, very sharp stone that was used to cut things with, similar to the one of the stones in the breastplate of the Kohen, the pitadah. It's just literally an amazing creature. Apparently, Shlomo used it not only the building of the Beis HaMikdash, but building of his palace as well. Again, a lot of miracles and magic involved with this. The name Shamir, and again, morphologists and scientists and rabbis have looked into this for generations. Again, most of us follow Rashi that was some type of a small worm. There was something I wanted to say about the language of the shamir. I can find it here. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay. When they talk about the glance of the shamir, it looked at something, it would split it. This could be explained by science as, certain low or high frequency waves that could resonate and change the molecular structure of materials, not unlike a laser beam or radioactivity. But the shamir has been the subject of a great deal of scientific investigation. For example, we mentioned it was described as a green stone, and some people describe or define the shamir as something called emery. Emery was a blue-green stone in the ancient world that was used as an abrasive powder, not unlike the emery board that women use today, for example, to file down their nails. It's an abrasive. It's a piece of cardboard with these certain abrasive crystals on it that are used to file the nails, but it was known as an abrasive. And the word emery or comes from the Greek word smiris, which is very similar to shamir. So it's all part of that same morphology, if you will. This was used to cut the stones, and these are huge stones. And the shamir was tiny. It's as small as a grain of barley, and it had to be kept in a certain type of lead container. Otherwise, nothing could hold it because it would disintegrate anything that was trying to keep it. Let's see what else we have here. There's so much stuff on the shamir. How do they bring these stones to the Beis Hamikdash? More questions are raised than answered. In Sefer Malachim, when it describes the building of the Beis Hamikdash, clearly it talks about quarrying great stones to lay the foundation of the Beis Hamikdash. It doesn't explain how they quarried them, and maybe that's where the shamir came in. We're not really quite sure about it. The shamir disappeared after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, and interesting. A few years ago in the Philippines, scientists discovered a certain worm that was capable of eating through limestone. Now, again, granted, limestone is relatively soft rock. Nevertheless, the whole notion of a stone carving worm might not be so unrealistic after all. That the shamir that was talked about in legend could have been something that we just don't know about. But there are many, there are thousands, if not millions, of species that we don't know yet. Scientists each year are adding species to the various list of known creatures in the world. We haven't discovered everything. We've discovered a lot, but not everything. The Mishkan that we talk about in tomorrow's Parsha was the precursor to the Beis Hamikdash. The Mishkan was easy. I mean, relatively easy. You had poles and you had curtains. It was an enclosure, an enclosed space. Of course, it had to be portable because every time you had to move, you had to wrap it up and take it with you. And by the way, all of the connection in the Parsha tomorrow, there's a very strong connection between the Mishkan and Shabbos. The fact that you can't violate Shabbos to build the Mishkan. All of the 39 categories of malacha are based on the different types of activities used to build the Mishkan. So there's a lot of connection between Shabbos and Mishkan in the Parsha, but the Mishkan itself did not require the shamir except for Moshe to engrave names on the Urim V'Tumim, or on the stones, or those precious stones. The Beis Hamikdash itself is a much more complicated structure. There's a whole Masechta in Shas called Masechtas Midos, which gives you all the measurements with diagrams of how to build a Beis Hamikdash. There's some discussion at the exact location. On Harabayas today, there are different maps showing you where you may or may not walk in terms of the sanctity of the place. But we know pretty well where things are. If you have a chance to daven at the Kotel, you might notice that many people do not face directly at the Kotel. They face a little bit to the left when they daven. You stand in front of the Kotel. But if you turn to the left, that's the direction where the Kodesh Kodashim was located. So again, if you're outside of Israel, you face towards Israel, east or west, depending on what part of the globe you're on. If you're in Israel, you face towards Yerushalayim. And if you're in Yerushalayim, you face towards the Kotel. And if you're at the Kotel, some people turn a little bit to face the Kodesh Kodashim. But the Mikdash itself had many offices. It was a huge structure which had many platforms and ramps leading up to the area where the altar was, where the Mizbeach was. There was Ezras Nashim, Ezras Yisrael. There was a parapet around there. It's a very complicated structure. The Beis Hamikdash itself, the Kotel that we have now is the external wall, not part of the Mikdash. There's no inherent kedusha in terms of the kotel itself. Well, there is a machlokus. If you claim that the kotel is part of the Beis Hamikdash, are you allowed to put your hand in a crack of the wall to put a kvittel in? If you're not tahor, people who go to the Harabayas on Tisha B'Av, for example, many of them are careful to go to mikveh first, and not to wear, obviously not wearing shoes on Tisha B'Av. And people that go up during the year also wear sneakers. When they captured it in 1967, the religious soldiers were careful to put on sneakers, or at least go barefoot during the actual war when they conquered it, because you can't walk with shoes on the Makom HaMikdash. The structure itself, I don't understand. I raised this question before, and I'll raise it again. There are two areas that we have access to now since 1967. You have the Kotel itself, which had always been around, and people had access to it. Before 1967, it was just a little narrow alleyway in the Arab section, and men and women would be there together. There was no mechitza. It was a small section. It was a fraction of what it is today, and it was much higher up than what the Kotel is now. They excavated it a lot after 1967. But around the corner from the Kotel is the southern wall. The southern wall of the Beis Hamikdash is preceded by steps. And those are the steps that people used to use as they entered the Beis Hamikdash. That was an actual part of the Beis Hamikdash. In my mind, the southern wall has much more kedusha than the western wall. The only problem is a lot of stairs, so there's no plaza to stand for people. I guess it's a practical matter. They made the Kotel and the Kotel Plaza into a space. But I urge you, next time you're in Yerushalayim, when you're at the Kotel, go around to the right. You can walk up the steps that the people did on Sholosh Regalim to enter the Beis Hamikdash. It's all blocked off. You can't get in there. But the wall is there. That's part of the Beis Hamikdash. It's not an external wall like the Kotel is. We've given it a certain status. The Medrash says that external wall will never be destroyed. A lot of interesting things about it, but clearly the actual southern wall, and on the right near the southern wall, there's a Davidson Museum, which you should attend. Make a reservation to go there and watch their video presentation. It's a reconstruction of how the Ole Regel used to walk up. And also you have at the nexus, in between the western wall and the southern wall, you have stones that were knocked down by the Romans. You also have the stalls where the money changers would sit to help people, give them shkolim and sloim to redeem whatever master sheni they may have had, a place where they would have little animals to buy for sacrifices. So all those little shops were those stalls are still there by the southern, in between the western wall and the southern wall. Very, very important part of the Beis Hamikdash, which we should take a look at. Of course, the tunnels are also very, very important. And there's one spot in the tunnels which is about as close as you can get as to where the Kodesh Kodashim was. All this is because tomorrow morning we're going to read about the Mishkan. And the Mishkan was our first holy location, if you will, where God's Shekhinah came down, manifested itself to the Jewish people. That traveling Mishkan was the place where pretty much where we visited the divine, if you will. And the halachos for that are connected to Shabbos, as I said before, because all the 39 categories of work, agricultural work and construction work and all the different things that were done to build the Mikdash are what formed the basis of the 39 Avos Malachos that we may not do on Shabbos. But the construction of the original Beis HaMikdash in the time of Shlomo HaMelech, and also probably in terms of the second Beis HaMikdash, or I'm not sure, the Shamir is used in the discussion of the first Beis HaMikdash. I don't think the Shamir may have been used in the second Beis HaMikdash, because it was destroyed after the first temple. but it could have been. But it's still an amazing, amazing engineering feat when you consider that some of these stones weigh 100 tons. How did they schlep these stones from the quarry and put them in place and fit them exactly right? We have the videotape to go back to. But in any event, I thought I would share the story of the Shamir. It's one of the miraculous things. Physicists are still trying to figure it out, although they're coming closer to saying that this is a possibility, that there could be a certain type of a worm that has a very caustic, acidic acid that comes out of it that could literally cleave stones.
Okay, I think Wally accidentally went, well, he's back.
Back, Ben?
You're back.
Oh, I don't know what happened there. But clearly, the Shamir is not just a question of Midrashim, but it's certainly something that scientifically is possible. And it's one of the miracles of the construction of the Beis Hamikdash. The Shamir, as I said, was not used in the Mishkan, only to engrave those very, very hard stones with the names of the Shvatim. But the Shamir, the question that we have to raise, and I don't have a good answer for it, when they described Shlomo's construction of the Beis Hamikdash, he said they were quarrying stones, they were cutting stones. Now, if you want to say they were cutting stones with the Shamir, fine. How many Shamirs were there? Was there only one miraculous creature? Were there many? Was it a species? How long did it live? We don't know. We know that it existed. We know that Shlomo used it because you can't use metal implements to build a house of Hashem. Those are weapons of war. So Shlomo said, how do I build a Beis Hamikdash? And he was directed to the Shamir. It's a fascinating story. And when we think about the Mishkan and we think about the Beis Hamikdash that followed it, keep in mind that there are many, many more questions than there are answers in terms of how this massive structure was actually built. Was it engineering? Was it miraculous? I leave that up to you. But the Shamir is just one interesting creature. Yes.
Is there any thinking about how the second Beit HaMikdash was built? Was there any conversation about that?
There is some. I mean, they did quarry stones. For example, the Kotel itself was built by King Herod. He was called Herod the Great, meaning Herod the Great Builder. And he built many, many palaces, and he built he added to the Beis Hamikdash. So he was a builder. I don't think Herod used the Shamir. He quarried stone, but still, it's still an amazing engineering feat to get stones that big from the quarry, which was located near Jerusalem, up on the mountain and putting it in place. I mean, how do you lift a stone of 100 tons? How do you cut a stone that big and move it from point A to point B? You know, today we have cranes, today we have trucks. I mean, you could roll things on logs. Okay, that even the ancient Egyptians may have done that. You can roll heavy things on logs and you have hundreds of slaves pushing them. But lifting it up and putting it in place, and then remember, there's no cement holding these stones together. It's just the sheer weight of these stones who fit precisely one on top of the other. And I say, it's a miraculous event. So I don't think the shamir was used in the second temple, but it's still a miraculous engineering feat. There's a lot. The ancient world had tremendous ability in areas that we have yet to discover. If you ever get to Caesarea, for example, the underground archaeology in the water off Caesarea, where they built these docks for ships, just again, way advanced, that they were able to construct these deep water ports for ships to come in, and it all involved a lot of work underwater to build things. I guess miracles are, possible. I don't have it. I'm not an architect, but even architects wonder at the skill and the ability of these people, which I'm sure was divinely directed. Anyway, any other questions, comments? Okay. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Stay dry. And go over the parsha on the building of the Mishkan. It's fascinating stuff.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you. Good job.
Welcome back, Milty.